Welcome back to Typically Unique. It's just Kim today, and I am going to read a few docs in this video that are all of responding officers' reports that arrived later to the scene. They weren't just the first responders. So this is reports 6 through 9 from Moscow Police Department. And this is from Aaron Morris, dated November 14th, 22. And his narrative is that on November 13th, 22, at around 1300 hours, I was advised by Captain Barrett, to respond to work due to a homicide investigation. I was told to remain available for calls for service. At around 1630 hours, I relieved Officer Rosinski on the north side of 1122 King Road. I was stationed for scene security and helped keep a log of who entered and exited the crime scene. Officer Smith entered at 1700 hours and exited at 1725 hours. ISP Talbot entered at 1700 hours and left at 1740 hours. Corporal Payne entered at 1700 hours and exited at 1723 hours. PA Jennings entered at 1703 hours and exited at 1723 hours. ISP Jake entered at 1725 hours and left at 1738 hours. ISP Gideon entered at 1725 hours and exited at 1739 hours. Sergeant Blaker entered at 1728 hours and exited at 1740 hours. Corporal Payne entered at 1728 hours and exited at 1738 hours. Officer Stirk relieved me from the north side of the residence, and I went to the south side to relieve Officer Nunez at around 1800 hours. I stood at the rear of the residence for scene security. I assisted Sergeant Blaker in putting evidence tape on the sliding glass door on the south side of the residence. The tape was to ensure no persons tried to access the scene overnight. I returned to the north side of the residence for the remainder of the night. Once ISP and investigators made their final walkthrough, the residence was secured at 23:44 hours. Officer Rosendahl relieved me and I cleared. No further information. It says NFI. I'm assuming that's what it stands for. And he just certified that that was the truth, and Sergeant Gunderson reviewed it. All right, this is John Lawrence. On November 13th, 2022, at about 1200 hours, Captain Barrett called me and informed me there had been multiple victims of a homicide located in a residence on King Road and requested all available detectives. I called Detective Vargas and was informed she was out of town and would be back in Moscow on Monday morning. I called Detective Mowry and he informed me he would be on his way shortly. I called ISP Lieutenant Mike Mooney and told him I need assistance from ISP detectives in processing the crime scene. Lieutenant Mooney put me in contact with Sergeant Gilbertson. I briefed Sergeant Gilbertson on what I knew, and he told me he would start to assemble his team. I responded to the scene where I met with Sergeant Gunderson. Sergeant Gunderson informed me that officers were dispatched to an unconscious person at 1122 King Road, and that is when they found 4 deceased college-aged people in the residence. I told Sergeant Gunderson I needed someone from his team to return to the police department to start writing an affidavit for a search warrant. Sergeant Gunderson asked Officer Nunez to handle that task. I then did a very brief walkthrough of the residence. I entered the residence from the entrance on the north side of the building. Officer Warner, who was securing the scene, logged my entrance into the residence. I then went up the stairs and located a deceased female on the floor and male in the bed in the west bedroom on the second floor. I climbed the stairs to the third floor and located 2 deceased females in the southeast bedroom. They were both in the bed. I spoke with Officer Smith, who was securing the residence at the south entrance, for a moment. Then I exited the residence through the north entrance. Officer Warner noted my departure. I called Sergeant Gilbertson and informed him of the additional information provided to me and what I had seen. I told him MPD would be needing their assistance. I also told Sergeant Gilbertson MPD had an officer writing an affidavit for a search warrant. I returned to the police department where I met with Sergeant Blaker and Corporal Payne, whom I had called earlier and requested they respond to the PD. At this time, Detective Mowry was at the police department. I requested they interview the other occupants of the residence where the deceased were located. There were also several friends of the deceased who had been with the deceased the night before and may have had information of their whereabouts and who they were with prior to the murders. Those interviews started at about 13:48 hours. Those to be interviewed arrived at the PD about 13:30 hours. I put them in the training room and provided them with drinks and snacks. Captain Lanier arrived and asked me how he could help. I requested he find officers that were not already tasked and complete a canvass of the neighborhood. Captain Lanier took care of the neighborhood canvassing. At about 14:23 hours, JK, the blank Xana, arrived at the PD. Oh, Jeff Kernodle, the father of Xana, arrived at the PD. He was informed of Xana's death by Captain Dollinger. Captain Barrett informed me Ethan Chapin's family had been notified of Ethan's death. Captain Barrett asked me to take care of the death notifications for Maddie Mogan and Kaylee Gonsalves. Captain Barrett provided me with the information the university had on file for Mogan and Gonsalves. There was no emergency contact information for either, so I called Kootenai County Dispatch due to Mogan and Gonsalves' home addresses being in Kootenai County. I provided the KCSO dispatcher of the addresses listed with the university for Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonsalves. M told me she had the names S and C. So this is Steve and Christy Gonsalves listed as residents of the address provided for Kaylee Gonsalves. I requested a death notification for them. I was contacted by Deputy Mitch Jan from KCSO. He asked what he could tell the parents, and I informed him we knew very little at this time. A short time later, Deputy Jan called me and told me that when he arrived to give the notification, the parents were already aware. I also provided Madison Mogan's address, and M was not able to locate anyone with the name Mogan at that address. M said she would send a Coeur d'Alene PD officer by the residence to make contact. A short time later, Officer Matt Sinkus requests I call him. When I made contact with Officer Sinkus, he told me SNKL, Scott and Karen Laramie, I believe Maddie's parents of Madison Mogan, were driving to Moscow. About 20 minutes after my conversation with Officer Sinkus, the Maddie's mom and stepdad arrived at the PD. Captain Barrett gave the death notification. Captain Barrett requested I interview them. I spoke with Scott and Karen in the lobby interview room. They told me they had a great relationship with Madison. She got along with everyone. She had a strong relationship with her boyfriend, and I believe that's Jake Schreiber. I think that's his last name, JS, who lives in Boise, and that she had just gone to Boise to see him the weekend prior. Madison and Jake had been dating for about a year and a half, and Jake is from blank. I asked if there were any problems with past boyfriends, and there were none to their knowledge. I asked if Madison had mentioned any stalking behavior from anyone or anyone that made her uncomfortable, and they said she never spoke of anything. The rest of my shift was spent allocating resources where they were needed. And that was reviewed by Anthony Dollinger. This report is John Rosinski, November 14th. On November 13th, 22, I received a phone call advising me there was a quadruple homicide at 1122 King Road. I arrived to the Moscow Police Department, put on my police issued uniform and relieved Officer Warner at the above address, who is currently holding scene security and maintaining a log of who came in and out of the apartment at the front door, which is on the north side of the apartment. I was on scene for about 2 hours until I was relieved by Officer Morris, who took over my duties. The following day, on November 14th, 22, I learned that a sheath was found inside the apartment. The sheath was tan in color and had a Marine Corps eagle, globe, and anchor symbol on the sheath. The words USMC were located under the EGA, and K bar was above the EGA. I was tasked to follow up with businesses in town to see if that particular knife was sold there. I followed up with Tri State Outfitters, Big Five Sporting Goods, Moscow Building Supply, Spence Hardware, and Walmart. Each of the above stores does not sell a K-Bar brand knife. While at Walmart, I was speaking with a staff member, S, name listed on name tag, who was showing me the knives on display. She told me about 2 to 3 weeks ago, a white college aged male asked for a black ski mask that would cover his face. S was unable to provide much detail other than he was taller than she was and maybe had tan skin complexion. S said she advised the male they did not have any black ski masks and only camo. S said the male then walked away. On November 14th at about 11:45 hours, I spoke with, it looks like PR, at the Memorial Gym substation. R is currently the blank for the fraternity blank. I asked R if he could walk me through what he did on the night of November 12th, 22 and the early morning of 11/13/22. R said at about 18:30 on 11/12/22 he was at a party. R said the party was at the Tree House, which is an off-site campus house for the sorority blank. R did not know the specific address, but said the house is near the White's apartments. R said at the party he saw EA, and I think that is the neighbor, Emily Arndt, who was with E. Boyfriend, unknown name, maybe, Hunter. R said Arndt was the only member of blank that he recognized at the party. R said he left around 2200 or 2300 hours. R said he went back to blank and watched a movie with, looks like CD, TR, and KS. So they were all watching a movie. R said he went to the corner club around 1:49 hours on November 13th, 22 to pick up JG, JD, and NR. R said they were alone and not with anyone. R said he dropped the three above individuals off at their apartment off of King Road. R said after he dropped them off, he went back home. That's the end of his report, and Captain Barrett reviewed it. This is report number 9, Aaron Morris, on November 14th, written on November 14th, 22. His narrative is that on November 14th, 22, at approximately 1100 hours, I responded to 1122 King Road in regards to follow-up. I took note of who came and went from the scene. ISP detectives, as well as Sergeant Blaker, Detective Vargas, and prosecuting attorneys entered the residence. It looks like GC arrived shortly after with her cadaver dogs to attempt and locate a blood trail from the residence. ISP entered the residence at they entered the residence at 11:25 hours. Detective Vargas entered at 11:26 hours and left at 12:26 hours. Sergeant Blaker entered at 11:27 hours, exited at 11:49 hours. Prosecuting attorney Ashley Jennings and William Thompson entered at 11:30 hours and left at 11:53 hours. P.A. Jennings re-entered at 1200 hours. Sergeant Blaker re-entered at 1200 hours with Detective Vargas. Blank arrived, I think it starts with a C, with her canine at 1316 hours. They all remained in the area until 1421 hours. Everyone cleared the scene, and the residence was secured again at 1421 hours. I stood by on scene for security until relieved. I cleared the residence at 1600 hours when Officer Rosinski relieved me. And that was reviewed by Gunderson. I am going to stop there and come back with some more videos. See you then.